Commissioner Henches,
Here.
Commissioner Hartman, here. Commissioner Huber,
Here.
Commissioner Ed Robbie via Skype teleconference. He's downstairs in the conference room.
Here.
Commissioner Bonhoff
Here.
and Commissioner Watson,
Here.
who's also in the conference room downstairs. County staff, we have Brad Davis, our planning manager, Marty Schmitz, zoning administrator, Greg Wagner, senior planner, Nathan Hall here tonight? Nope,
I'm here. You forgot to call me.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson here.
Yep.
Who's running the camera? Deb Brazil or Karen?
For substitute here.
What'd she say?
Kiara.
Here.
Sarah?
Kiara.
Kiara? And Barb Simonson, Deputy Clerk to the Board. Also, our Scott County Commissioner, Tom Wolf, is in attendance in the hallway. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the September 14th, 2020 Board of Adjustment minutes.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Johnson, second by Commissioner Von Hoff. Any further discussion? All those in favor? How about the 5 board members right here? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And then Commissioner Robbie
Aye.
and Commissioner Watson.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing for the Mason Brink variance, PL number 2020-046, which was tabled from September 14th, 2020, the Planning Advisory Commission agenda. It's a request for a variance to reduce the required lot width from 100 feet to 66 feet. It's located section 10, Credit River Township, and the current zoning is UER, and Greg Wagner will present.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, on the screen is the site location map of the subject property in Section 10, Credit River Township. As indicated, the Mason Brinks have a 96 acre or 95.32 acre parcel outlined in red here. Or for locational purposes, this is the county border on the east side. To the north is Murphy-Hannerhan Park. County Highway 21 is to the south. This is an aerial photo of the subject property. Currently on the property, there are 2 detached accessory buildings located right here. In this location here, this is a 2019 aerial photo. This spring, the Mason Brinks built a home for a family member right in this location here. And the request is based on wanting to split off that area where that new home is built. So this was the survey with the building permit showing where the home and the septic sites are located. It's approximately 4 acres in that area. Last month, the request before this board was a variance from the 100-foot lot width down to 66 feet. After review by Credit River Township, the issue was this 66-foot strip of land going from the building site out to the public road. As the board members know, Credit River Township is doing their own planning and zoning. In September, they adopted their own comprehensive land use plan. So later this year, they will be taking land use authority back from Scott County. As part of that, they will be re-guiding this property to diversified rural, which may allow the applicants more density, but that would be reviewed under the township. Long-term, this is an area of Scott County or the township that long-term would be urbanized. So urban services will be brought down. The issue that the township brought up in their review of this application was having a 66-foot strip when we have developable land to the north and developable land to the south. That strip of land provides a barrier or potentially an issue when we have a landowner with a strip of land between two developable parcels. So the township recommended at their September meeting to look at the variance differently, and instead of allowing the 66-foot strip to meet the minimum county standard, they said, why don't we just do a variance from the frontage on a public road? So the application was tabled, and then this is the new proposal. So essentially what we're doing is splitting off parcel B. So it'll be just over 4 acres right here. The rest of the land outlined in green is parcel A, so that will remain under John and Mary Messenbrink's ownership. Parcel B and this lot to the north, the orange line is the existing driveway that is shared. It's shared by these two sheds, by this parcel, and by this parcel. So that's shared by easement. So what will happen through the variance is John and Mary will own all the frontage here. So if utilities in the future need to be extended along the road, we would not have another landowner that could provide a barrier to that orderly development of utilities. So that's what the township recommended. County staff is open to, or we are supporting that idea as well. And the landowner actually prefers this solution. So they amended their request. So now what's before the board tonight is a variance from the county requirement for lot frontage on a publicly maintained road. And as indicated, the township, the applicant, and county staff are supporting that request. I would stand for any questions.
Any questions by the board? Okay, hearing none. This is a public hearing. If anyone wishes to address this issue, please step up to the podium and sign in your name and address. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Von Hoff, second by Commissioner Huber. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, let's have the 5 board members. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? And Commissioner Robbie
Aye.
and Commissioner Watson.
Aye.
Public hearing is closed. Motion passes 7-0. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, based on the findings listed in the staff report, I recommend approval of the variance from the required 66-foot lot frontage on a public maintained road.
I have a motion by Commissioner Huber. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second that motion. Robbie?
Second by Commissioner Robbie. Any further discussion? We'll put it to vote. The 5 board members, all those in favor say aye.
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 I will
Aye.
abstain.
And Commissioner Robbie,
Aye.
Commissioner Watson.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 6-0 with Commissioner Johnson abstaining. That would be it for the Scott County Board of Adjustment. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Henches,
I'll second it.
motion, second by Commissioner Huber. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Commissioner Robbie
Aye.
and Commissioner Watson.
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned, 7-0.
I call to order the Scott County Planning Advisory Commission, October 12th, 2020. And we'll start with the roll call. Commissioner Henches,
Here.
Commissioner Hartman,
Here.
Commissioner Huber,
Here.
Commissioner Robbie,
Here.
Commissioner Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Von Hoff, here. Commissioner Watson,
This meeting is being recorded.
Commissioner Watson.
Here.
Okay, for everyone who is watching, do social distancing. You'll see 5 commissioners up here. We have 2 other commissioners are with us virtually in another room. They're monitoring everything as we go through, and you will hear me call all of the votes on roll call, including them. Also present this evening, we have Brad Davis, our planning manager, Marty Schmitz, our zoning administrator, Greg Wagner, our senior planner, Barb Simonson, deputy clerk to the board. County Commissioner Tom Wolf is also here this evening. We will go now to our first item as approval of our September 12th Planning Advisory Commission meeting minutes. All the commissioners have been sent a copy of the minutes and an opportunity to review the minutes. Are there any corrections, deletions, or additions to the minutes as printed? Hearing none, at this time I'll entertain a motion to approve the Planning Advisory Commission meeting minutes from September 12th, 2020.
I'll move to approve.
I have a motion by Commissioner Johnson. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
A second by Commissioner Henches. Any further discussion? I will call for a roll call vote on this to approve the minutes. Commissioner Henches,
Yes.
Commissioner Hartman,
Yes.
Commissioner Huber,
Yes.
Commissioner Robbie,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Von Hoff, yes. Commissioner Watson.
Yes.
The minutes are approved. Our next item is our consent agenda. We have 4 items this evening listed on the consent agenda. All items listed are considered by the Planning Commission to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a Planning Commission board member or a member of the public so request, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda to be considered separately. First item, number 3.1, is a public hearing, the Brink Rezoning, number 2020-047, tabled from the September 14th, 2020 Planning Advisory Commission meeting. It's a request to rezone 95.32 acres from Urban Expansion Reserve District, UER, to Urban Expansion Reserve Cluster District, UER-C. Location is Section 10, Credit River Township, and the current zoning is UER. Anyone wish to have that removed from the consent agenda? Okay. The next item, number 3.2, is the Bauer rezoning. It's number 2020-057. It's a request to rezone 40 acres from A1 Agricultural Preservation District to A3 Agricultural Preservation Density District. The location is Section 23. This is in Belle Plaine Township. The current zoning is A1. Does anyone wish to remove that from the consent agenda? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next one. The next item, number 3.3, is Sioux Valley Estates. Is the applicant. It's 2020-036, a request for a preliminary and final plat of Sioux Valley Estates consisting of 4 lots on 40 acres. Location is Section 11, Newmarket Township. The current zoning is rural residential 1. Anyone wish to remove that from the consent agenda? Yes, sir? You would like it to be removed? Okay. Okay, so we removed 3.3, and we will be considering that one as soon as after we approve the consent agenda. Okay, the next item is item 3.4. It's Pfeiffer Comp Plan Amendment, number 2020-044. Request to re-guide a 5-acre parcel along New Louisville Frontage Road from UER, Urban Expansion Reserve, to commercial on the 2040 planned land use map. Location is Section 22. It's in Louisville Township. Current zoning is UER. Does anyone wish to remove that from the plan? From the consent agenda. Okay, so the items we will be approving on the consent agenda is item 3.1, item 3.2, and item 3.4, and 3.3 will be considered separately. So I would like a motion to approve the consent agenda on these 3 items.
Mr. Chair, I approve the consent agenda as written, recognizing item 3.3 will be discussed separately.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Huber. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner.
Second by Robbie.
I have a second, Commissioner Robbie, by Commissioner Henches.
Fine.
At this time, I will call for a vote to approve the consent agenda on those 3 items. Commissioner Henches,
Yes.
Commissioner Hartman,
Yes.
Commissioner Huber,
Yes.
Commissioner Robbie,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
I will abstain on the Brink 3.1, but a yes on the other 2.
Okay. Abstention on part of that. Commissioner Von Hoff, yes. And Commissioner Watson.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes with 6 yeses and 1 abstention. So now we will consider the Sioux Valley Estates application. This is number 33, and making the staff report this evening will be Greg Wagner, our senior planner. Good evening, Mr. Wagner.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. On the screen is the site location map of the subject property in Section 11, Newmarket Township. This property is a little ways north of Elko Newmarket. You can see the city boundary to the south. It's located a little east of Interstate 35 and north of County Road 62. The site is accessed by Beard Avenue and then 240th Street East, which are both township roads. This is an aerial photo of the 40-acre property. Historically, this has been open agricultural land, as you see here. The current zoning, as indicated, is rural residential 1. This is an area of the township that can be developed at higher densities, but what the applicants are proposing tonight is to just subdivide this property into 4 10-acre parcels. So on the screen now is the proposed plat of Sioux Valley Estates. Each of these lots is 10 acres. These locations are proposed for the plat as far as building sites. The individual lot owner, whoever buys the lots, can choose to relocate the home locations once they purchase the property, but the applicants are required to prove to the county that each lot meets our standards and is indeed buildable, so as these potentially would be transferred to other owners, those future owners can be assured that these are buildable. So what you're seeing here on each lot is a proposed home location and then 2 septic sites for each proposed parcel. As we get to the east side of the lot, there are some drainage areas that are identified. So the 2 home locations there are proposed a little closer to the road. You can see the wetland areas identified here on the eastern side of the property. The township is the wetland regulatory agency for enforcing the Wetland Conservation Act. The applicants have submitted their wetland delineation to the township in the Scott Soil and Water District, and that is under review. We anticipate a notice of decision from the township for that very soon. In your staff report, there were recommended conditions from county staff pertaining to the review of the septics and proposed grading for what we see here on the plat. Scott County Environmental Services has approved all the septic sites, and Scott County Natural Resources has approved the proposed grading plan. One of the things we typically look for on a grading plan such as this is low floor elevations on the homes to make sure that they're 1 foot, at least 1 foot above any adjacent water body. They have to be 1 foot above the 100-year flood elevation. The main issue, which the gentleman requested this be pulled, and I'll let him maybe go into some more detail, has to do with the public road. This was an issue that was emailed to county staff as well as the township. And the best way I can explain it, I've outlined here in orange the gravel road which ends in a cul-de-sac. This is then an aerial photo of that same area, so you can see the township roadway. The issue with this piece of property is the placement of the road. The majority of township roads, I should step back a second. The red line here is the south property line of the 40 acres under review tonight. It is also the section line between section 11 and section 14. Typically, a township road will border the section line, meaning half of the road would be on the north side of the section line and half of the road would be on the south side. 240th Street here, when it was created, for whatever reason, was entirely placed on the south side of the section line. So the adjacent resident who lives here emailed the county and township, because this area has not been platted, so no official right-of-way has been dedicated to the township. Most township roads under statute exist through what's called a prescriptive easement, whereby if there's an established road, the township under that prescriptive easement has rights to maintain that area of the road, as well as areas off of the road, like typically the ditch where they can plow snow and do drainage and stuff like that. So under prescriptive easements, most township roads exist that way. What the property owner is indicating here is that under that prescriptive easement, normally that's fine when the road parallels the section line, but here it's entirely on these 4 properties. So really the underlying landowners own that land. It's just through easement. The question is, what does the township maintain? So that's being investigated. So the question is, okay, we have the road, we have a ditch area. Does that maintained area make it all the way to the property line? This was reviewed by the township attorney. The township did not have enough information without a survey to determine whether they maintain to that property line. We also reviewed this with the county attorney's office, and they concurred with the township attorney's assessment, and essentially indicated what needs to happen here is the applicants need to determine through title review and a survey of the road what area is actually maintained by the township. If their survey would come back and show that the township ditch extends to the property line, they would then have legal access to the road. If they don't have access, if the road does not go to that property line, then they would have an issue they need to resolve potentially with the landowners on the south side of the road. So in review with the township and county attorney, earlier today, I sent you some amended conditions. So the top conditions were in the staff report that need to be satisfied prior to county board consideration. So I've indicated what parts have been already approved, and then this lower 4 recommended conditions would be what we are now recommending tonight. And it's specifically number 2, where the county attorney has recommended we add the underlined language that title insurance or opinion shall verify that the subject property has clear property access to the township maintained portion of 240th Street East. The applicants have indicated they're working on a survey to show that. That issue is not something that this body can resolve. It's really the applicants needing to resolve it through title and survey work. So on the recommendation of the county attorney's office, they're recommending we add this condition, and if this board chooses to, we would recommend, continuing this forward, because they could resolve this in a week. They could resolve this in 2 weeks ahead of the next planning commission meeting. And this is really something that the county attorney's office needs to tell us is okay or not okay. And it would not be forwarded to the county board until this issue is resolved. I do also want to note that the applicants did go to the September Newmarket Township meeting, and the township did recommend approval of the request. I would stand for any questions, and I know the applicants are here as well as the neighboring property owner, so I'm sure they'll have comments as well.
Okay. First off, any commissioners have questions? Commissioner Huber.
Greg, as far as the road is concerned, I mean, it's kind of odd that it's not on the section line. Would that road be rebuilt that way? It's a gravel road right now, right?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Huber, this really is kind of a township issue, so it's a township road. More than likely, they would rebuild it, where it's at now. But that decision would be up to the town board, who's the local road authority.
Now, will this road eventually extend over to Logan Way down the line, long-term planning?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Huber, potentially, I know This area here is a sod farm, so it's really low hydric. It would depend on what these properties and this property is able to do. If more lots were created there, it potentially could extend through. But it would just depend on whether these properties are able to further subdivide or not. More than likely, these are, hydric soils, so the question is whether they're actually developable. We don't know. So there really are no current plans for that to extend.
Any land's developable, it can be developed,
Right.
but it depends on if they have to replace with wetlands and other things.
Right.
Last question I have is the 2.5 acres, we've been talking about the northern part of New Market Township, maybe switching to 2.5. Has there been any discussion on that, or is that still a ways out?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Huber, I'm sorry, I should have clarified that. This is an area of the township, so this would be the north, it's hard to see on this little inset map, but the northeast part of New Market Township can go down to 2.5 acres. The applicants at this point are just looking to create 10s, so they're.
But he could go to 2.5 if he wanted. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner
because the
Johnson.
township has maintained this road for umpteen years, does eminent domain come into play at all?
So, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Johnson, so there is statute that covers township maintained roads. The question is, how far do they maintain? Do they maintain, the question is really along this tree line, do they maintain a ditch or anything up to essentially where the ag field starts? So that's the question the applicants need to answer. If they only maintain the road in a small ditch, and then we have 20 feet of gap that is not maintained by the township, then there's a definite issue. So that's what that's what the applicants need to figure out through their title and survey, and get that confirmed by the county and township attorneys.
Have they, Mr. Chairman, have they ever determined if they cleaned the ditch or anything? Do they have any records to indicate? Because townships clean ditches all the time.
I think, Commissioner Johnson, we're hoping to have a survey of that soon. The applicants mentioned that to me earlier today. That would answer the question for us.
Are there any other questions from commissioners at this point?
Mr. Chairman, this is Robbie. I've got
Robbie.
a question for Greg, just maybe for my own information. Is it up to the county attorney to decide whether or not to accept a title insurance policy or an opinion regarding having clear title to this portion of 240th Street?
Yep, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Robbie, that is correct. The county attorney is a signatory on the plat, so they sign the Mylars before they're recorded. So they want to see clear title and all title-related issues resolved and addressed before they will sign those Mylars. So that's why the county attorney has recommended that condition, that this is something they will be looking for to be resolved before this goes to the county board.
Okay, I guess my druthers would be a title insurance policy, but I just wanted to see if we had any say in that, so thank you, Greg.
Yep.
Commissioner Johnson, did you have another question?
Well, are we supposed to act on it or table it until we get more information?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Johnson, with the recommended with the conditions that were recommended, so the updated conditions, after meeting with the county attorney's office, it is their issue to verify that it is resolved. It's not something in their opinion that this commission can resolve. So it's something to do with, do they have legal access to the road or do they not have legal access to the road? That would be an answer that the county attorney is going to be looking for verification on. So when we met with the county attorney's office, their recommendation and staff's recommendation is that if this board chooses to recommend approval of the plat subject to these 4 conditions, which would include resolution to this issue.
Any other questions from the commissioners at this time? Thank you, Mr. Wagner. This is a public hearing, and did this individual wish to come forward? Or the applicant? Anyone can come up to the podium at this point and make comment on this application. Please sign in. There's a sign-in sheet at the podium there. Sign in before your comments, and it is very helpful if you start your comments with your name.
Sorry, writing as fast as I can. Thank you, Chair and Commissioners, for allowing us to be heard. Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Wagner, for the excellent explanation of the situation here. My name's Scott Temple. I live at 10171 East 240th across the street. I do have a letter that I'd like entered into the record. As Mr. Wagner explained, our concern is with the roadway. It's just something that's odd and needs to be resolved. We wouldn't want to have, future conflicts over that. We're not opposed to the project. We're not here to delay it or submarine it or anything like that. The idea is to prevent future conflicts like that. I can tell you that the township does not maintain the north side of that ditch. I have no idea when the last time they ever mowed or did anything was. They do the sides of the roads only. So if it's a no man's land, we need to figure out what it is. Personally, I'm happy with the access and maintenance agreement. That satisfy me, just as long as the new residents know that strip of land there isn't technically theirs. And if it is a right of way, they need to get on the township to actually maintain it because they don't. So we appreciate the opportunity to be heard. I realize this is more of a township issue. I think the township has had some shortcomings in their process here. We were not notified of their hearing, and seems that they failed to look at some of these details. Another one is the right to farm. Generally, there's an acknowledgement of right to farm that comes through the township. We own a horse stable across the road there. Everyone on the road but the Henry, I think, have horses. There's a lot of activities, a lot of trailering. We specialize in young folks. We have a lot of kids that are riding, and just want to make sure that they're aware of what they're getting into, and we like to see it in writing that, that like is required by the code, that there's a right to farm acknowledgement submitted with the final approval. And just my last comment is on the status of the farmland in the interim. We're hoping that it's not tilled up and just blowing dirt all over until sometime in the future. We're hoping that it's not tilled and a cover crop could be put in the meantime. Other than that, those are our only real concerns. We welcome the new neighbors, and just want to make sure that there's not an issue going forward. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Temple. Any other questions?
So while he's writing there, I'm Andrew. Andrew Sellner, my fiance is here, Sarah, and this is Adam and his wife Jessica. We were really excited about the prospect of this property. We appreciate you guys bringing all this stuff because it's important to get it clarified, especially with the road and everything. I'll address first the right to farm thing. I grew up kind of around horses. I worked at a thoroughbred farm and a horse racing farm for a long time. I know how to mark the stalls. I've walked horses. I love horses, so part of the allure of the property was seeing your farm across the street. So I don't know how many of you are here, but yeah, so that was part of the allure for us. So I don't think that's going to be really an issue for us. We're excited to be hopefully neighbors with you. Everything goes through, and maybe we'll have horses with you sometime. So that's kind of what we're thinking as far as that's concerned. So I'll let Adam talk about the rest of it.
Yeah, so my name is Adam Bess, and just like to address some of Scott's concerns here. Yeah, so as far as the property issue goes, we're working on that. Our our surveyor will be out this week to survey the ditch and do the boundary along the south side of our property. And then we'll be passing that along to title and hopefully getting a determination from title here in the next week or two. And if there is an issue with access, we're not quite to the edge of the right of way or whatever, we'd be more than happy to work out an agreement with you guys. And, you know, we're planning on living there, so we want to see that ditch maintained too. And so it's not something that we're just going to leave and let go. As far as the cover crop goes, our intention until we have the other 2 lots sold is to continue to farm the property. So, you know, leaving it as a dust bowl wouldn't happen. We'll continue to farm it
And
into
Dan-
the future. And, you know, obviously when we build our homes, we'll have, you know, grass planted in there, and then what isn't grass will continue to be farmed. So.
And Dan Thompson, who does it now, he said he's still willing to farm the other 2 tens, so he said just let him know as soon as we're going through with that, and he'll take care and do that, so. So that's kind of where we're at, so I don't know if you guys have any more questions while we.
Okay, I'll check and see if the commissioners have any other questions for you guys.
Sorry.
Thank you, gentlemen. The commissioners have any questions for the? Okay, thank you very much for coming up and giving your input there. So anyone else who'd like to make comment on this application at this time? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion at this time to close the public hearing.
So
So
moved.
moved. So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Henches. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Huber. I will call the roll to close the public hearing. Commissioner Henches,
Yes.
Commissioner Hartman,
Here, yeah, yes.
Commissioner Huber,
Yeah.
Commissioner Robbie,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes,
Commissioner Von Hoff, yes. Commissioner Watson.
Yes.
Public hearing is closed at this time. At this time, I'll entertain a motion or discussion on the item before us.
Mr. Chair, I still have I guess, a question to Greg and basically expand off what Barb said. I'm a little confused on this, determining the road situation. They're gonna survey it now. They'll know in a week or so where they stand. Should we table this, or should we, move forward with, older conditions and the new conditions you have in your report?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Huber, it is staff's recommendation that we recommend approval of this request to the county board, subject to the 4 amended conditions. In speaking with the applicant on this issue and what he just mentioned to the commission, they're working through the survey, and as indicated, that survey could be done within the week, and then that could be to their title company. So we believe that some resolution will occur on this within the next couple weeks. So tabling it to the November meeting, we don't feel is necessary. They've indicated their willingness, if they find there is a gap issue, they've indicated their willingness to work with the adjacent landowners on a separate agreement. So those are things that we as staff and the county attorney's office would look for, so we feel comfortable with recommending this move forward.
Thank you.
Any other questions or action at this time?
well, Mr. Chairman, we have a survey here. Did the survey here pick this up, or how did it get discovered? Because
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Johnson, it was something that the neighbor on the south side of the road identified and made the county aware. We then made the applicants aware because their survey pins actually the properties on the south, their pins actually do exist on the north side of the road. So it was something the neighbor, through the public hearing notice, the county was notified.
so this survey is not correct.
Sorry, Commissioner Johnson, what is gonna be surveyed in the next week is the township road area. So to this point, they've done the survey work really on the property. The survey that we're talking about is a survey more of the road and where's the ditch, how far does that go towards the property line? So it would be somewhat two different things, but that is not reflected on this current drawing
So will there be a separate survey?
of that road area, yes.
And then all these people have to sign off on that too? The county attorney and the recorder and everybody?
It would provide guidance as to what along the road the township maintains. Once that is known, then we can deal with, okay, what is the next step to resolve any issue if there is an issue? We believe there's an issue, we just don't know what it is at this point.
Since the road authority is the township, then does the county forward the information to the township? Is that how that would work, Greg?
Mr. Chair, so the township attorney has weighed in on this as well, so the township and their attorney are aware of this issue, so any information that we get would definitely be shared with the township and their attorney and their engineer for review. Again, all this would be before county board action on the request.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, at this time, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to approve the request of Adam Bessie, Jessica Bessie, Andrew Sellner, and Sarah Marsnick. Preliminary plat of Sioux Valley Estates consisting of 4 lots and 40 acres. And then we're doing the final plat at the same time. Final plat of Sioux Valley Estates consisting of 4 lots and 40 acres. Noting that there's 5 conditions that have to be met, plus an additional amended conditions that have to be satisfied prior to going to the county board.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Huber. Is there any discussion before I call for a vote on this? Hearing none at this time, I'll call for a vote to approve the motion on the table. Commissioner Henches,
Yes.
Commissioner Hartman,
Yes.
Commissioner Huber,
Yes.
Commissioner Robbie,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Von Hoff, yes. Commissioner Watson,
Yes.
motion is approved with the additional amended conditions on there. Thank you very much to the applicant and for Mr. Temple coming in this evening and giving their information and input on that. Our next item is a tabled item from our October 12th meeting, and it is a conditional use permit for Douglas Schaefer to operate a private heliport. And the commission, I'm going to have Mr. Marty Schmitz, our zoning administrator, come in and he'll be making the staff report. But since the item has been tabled, I will ask for a motion from the commission to remove the item from the table to discussion, to continue our discussion on that. So if I could have a motion, I'd entertain a motion to remove the item from the table, and we will start out with a presentation when that is done by Mr. Schmitz.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion, we remove it from the table.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Hartman. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, second by Commissioner Henches. Okay, I will call for a vote to remove this item from the table to continue our discussion on it. Commissioner Henches,
Yes.
Commissioner Hartman,
Yes.
Commissioner Huber,
Yes.
Commissioner Robbie,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, a question.
Yes.
Does that mean everybody here can speak again, or are we
No,
gonna
no, no,
limit it?
we're
We
in
don't wanna
discussion
be
at this
too-
point. So it's removing it from the table back to continue our discussion, because we were in discussion at the time that we tabled it. Now we're bringing it back
Is
into
it for the
discussion.
whole public or just staff and?
When the public hearing has closed on it, and it's just, we're at the discussion point of the
Okay.
meeting.
Yes.
Okay? Commissioner Von Hoff, yes. Commissioner Watson?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, we are back in discussion. From this, good evening, Mr. Schmitz, and I believe you'll be bringing us back up to date on where we were at when we tabled this.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, on the screen you can see an aerial photo of the applicant's property. Just for a little refresher, we're in section 26 of Cedar Lake Township. This street here, about a quarter mile to the west of the property, is County Road 23 or Panama Avenue. About a quarter to a half mile north of the property is County Road 2 or 260th Street. Applicant's property consists of 40 acres that he's requesting the conditional use permit on. The northern 26 acres of his parcel here is in the Wildwood Ponds development. It is zoned RR1C, which is a cluster zoning district, and in a cluster, residential cluster district, a heliport is not an allowed use. The southern 14 acres here that he has a purchase agreement from the Lovelet family on is zoned RR1, and in the RR1 is where the heliport is proposed. And the heliport is allowed as a conditional use permit within that RR1 district. Conditional use permits are uses that can be allowed provided you can put conditions or restrictions on the permit to protect the health, safety, and general welfare of the occupants of the property and the surrounding area. If you had issues or items come up that could not be addressed with appropriate conditions and restrictions, it is possible to deny a conditional use permit. The Planning Commission did continue this item, as you said, Mr. Chairman, from the September 14th, December 12th or 14th Planning Commission meeting for the applicant to provide some additional information. That information included some topographical elevation information, and you did receive a report in your packet with that information. Also requested was a heliport emergency action plan. That was also included with your agenda, and we did receive an email from Todd Fridges, who is the Elko New Market Fire Chief, saying he reviewed the plan and he had no comments. Also included with your report was a lighting plan for the heliport. So the applicant is considering putting lights in the slab of the port. Those lights would be controlled via his phone and would only be on or off if he needed them for takeoff or landing. You were also provided some general operating restrictions from the FAA. And then lastly, a sound study was requested. That was not included in your agenda materials, but you were emailed that report here earlier today. And I think a copy of it has also been provided in your folders here tonight. It's my understanding that the individual who conducted the sound study is on via our WebEx and would be able to answer questions or present any of that information if you have questions. In addition to this information, Planning Commission asked staff to review the conditions, the draft conditions that were presented back at last month's meeting. We did do that, and we made some updates to those conditions, which we intend to go through with you. However, before we do that, I think I'd like to turn the application over, or the presentation over to the applicant to present the new information that you received here tonight, or with your agenda.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Schmidt.
So,
And again, please start your comments with your name for our record.
Okay. First name Rex, last name Alexander, representing the client for this property. Thank you again for having me here today. Let's see if we can plug in. I just have it on the stick. It'll be easier to go to that, if I can find it. Let's see. I would ask that the one gentleman that we do have online is Mr. Norman Dottie, who is the sound acoustician expert that we brought in to do the evaluation. If we could we do the noise study first? He's on the East Coast and it's been a very long day in the field. So do you have any specific questions on regards to the noise study at this time? I would ask to see if he is actually can talk online. I'll bring the document up.
And I will address this to the commissioners. We received this information today, the letter, and I'm sure that all of you had an opportunity to review it. Is there any questions for the author of this information that we received on this sound study?
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Huber.
Question on the sound study. I read this, it talks a lot about the Minnesota PCA, their requirements and things like that. Does it, the sound study, does it give an opinion of how much it will be over 65 decibels or not? Or was there a study with the helicopter monitoring the decibel levels, or what happened here?
No, this was, per the board's request, a sound study that was what we refer to as a tabletop study.
Okay.
So it's based on the mathematical functions and the physics of the noise based on the distances and then the Minnesota criteria for the sound study. So a physical flight was not conducted. To advance the sound study, if one of the pieces that is missing for a physical sound study would be the ambient noise would have to be recorded for that area.
But did the study say, did it give an opinion of certain levels of decibels that will happen? Did it say that in here?
No, it does not.
Okay.
It was based on the criteria that was specified in the Minnesota statute. And Mr. Dottie is online, I believe, if you want to ask him any specific questions. I know he dialed in.
Are there any specific questions for Mr. Dottie from the commissioners about the sound?
I don't know if it's a sound or time, but we just had an incident where the president had to be taken away by helicopter, and you couldn't hear it, but I was watching real closely, and it was like 2 minutes, and he was pretty far up already. And the same when he went to land, and then he returned, and everything seemed very similar. And I don't know, that was a pretty big helicopter. And like I said, we didn't get the sound, but it was the time that got me, how quickly it was that he was really up pretty high over buildings and
Right.
everything. Now, is Mr. Dottie one to ask, or would that be you?
Either or, I would say, in that space.
But does that seem right? Anybody watch that? Anybody watch the takeoff and the landing? Nobody? Did you think it was pretty fast?
Yeah, those are running helicopters, though.
He got it, and then they fired up the rotors. And
Well, they're running before he gets in it,
it was?
I'm pretty sure. I can't remember.
Did you see it? Anybody? It was during the day.
Which helicopter are you referring to?
Marine One.
Oh, no, I did not watch that particular one. What's the question that you have?
Yeah.
Well, the time, I mean, I
Right.
thought when he got in, there was no rotors going around.
Right,
And then when he got in, then they fired up the rotors, and it was pretty fast.
Right.
And I thought it was like 2 minutes, and they were going over buildings already. And that's what I guess I'm thinking this helicopter would do something
It'd be a
similar.
little different. The key in Marine One, if that's the one we're talking about, they have what's called an APU, an auxiliary power unit, which is a small turbine that they have running. What that allows them to do is do their pre-flight checks and do all of their avionics checks and have everything up and running on that first. Rotors will not be moving. They also use that APU then to provide power to start the other two turbine engines on board. So a lot of the stuff that was done ahead of time, in this case with the aircraft that the client has, would be done after the one and only engine was started up. Now there are things that are done prior to that with just battery power applied. You'd have to look at the checklist and go through the checklist to determine exactly what's turned on, what checks are done before the start of the engine. Starting a Bell 206 is not too terribly complicated, and on a good day it takes about 3 to 4 minutes from start to finish.
Finish being over 500 feet high.
Now once he's taking off, if you're talking about that point from where the aircraft leaves the ground and then is on a departure, what we would call a departure, we look at a specific airspeed, and it's called out in the report, which is best rate of climb. Now in the Bell 206 L3, they point to 57 knots, which under normal circumstances with continuous operational power will allow you to climb at a rate of 1,100 feet per minute. Now, in the case that what we're talking about here is at what point would the aircraft then transcend above 500 feet? Because that is what we consider the floor for all aircraft traffic then above that. So I think it was brought out in this particular point on the departure, we were looking, I believe, at about 27.3 seconds from departure, from the time that the aircraft lifted off to the time it went through 500 feet would be about 27.3 seconds.
Mr. Chair, what you're saying is that about a 2 or 3 minute warm-up time, and then they take off, be about less than a minute before they're at 500 feet.
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Alexander.
Mr. Hentges?
I probably wouldn't know a decibel if it walked in the room here. I do know that if I'm standing on my front porch and a helicopter goes over, I can tell when there's one going over and when there isn't one going over. And I think what we're moving toward here with all the changes in conditions is a really strong effort from all parties to reach a compromise so that he can fly his helicopter. I'm seeing the applicant trying to compromise. I'm seeing our staff trying to compromise so that they can do this. But I don't know that the sound studies, I mean, it's going to be what it is. The question then becomes how often is it and where is it? And I think that's the part that's the most important here, because we all know you're going to hear it when it takes off and when it lands. And at least that's how I feel right now.
Any other comments on, or questions, specifically on the sound study at this point? Mr. Robbie or Commissioner Watson, do you have any questions?
Not at this time from Robbie.
No, from Watson.
Thank you, gentlemen. I think this time we can move on, Mr. Alexander.
Thank you very much. So the other document that was provided to you was the one in regards to the topographical data. So we went through and looked at the surrounding area to identify what the topographical data would look like. Close that. And let's see. And it, let's see, what page are we on here? Let's see. Page 3, we do talk about what the FAA then determines as acceptable altitudes for aircraft and helicopters. That's where we get the 500 feet over non-congested areas. And when we looked at the topo data, we looked out to 4,000 feet. in all directions. The elevation of the heliport is found to be at 1,009 feet, and that's based on a finished heliport. Right now, the elevation there is a slight bit lower, but once we finish that area and put concrete in, it'll probably be approximately 1,009 feet. The highest elevation within that 4,000 foot area that we would consider where the approach departure paths would be as far as the surfaces is 1,059 feet, and that was to the far north on the edge. So a difference of 50 feet is the maximum differential in height. The rest of the land is fairly flat in throughout that area. We have first evaluated the north approach departure path as depicted, and we looked at the land underneath of that. This is a picture of the graphical representation of what that land would be. So on the far right, you have the heliport, and as you go to the left, that's along that approach departure path out to the very end. And at no point does the land exceed the height of the FADO, or the heliport, if you will. All the land from there out is lower than. And then we superimpose the surface with the 8:1 to show that there is no penetration, and there's maximum clearance below that flight path. The other one that we looked at was then the 12-degree approach departure path. With that, we looked at what the height was, where the aircraft would then intercept a point at 4,000 feet on a 12-degree approach. He would be approximately 877 feet above the heliport elevation, and well clear of any obstructions, well clear of any traffic, and well within that 500 feet.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Commissioner Henson.
Mr.
Yes, ma'am.
Alexander, on the approach, or on the northern departure approach, whatever, you said it's 50 feet, but that's the land, it's not those telephone.
The vegetation?
Well, no, how about the electrical poles that are on the north?
I have a picture of that here in a minute.
Okay.
So the 12 degrees, the other one that we looked at, and we'll go ahead and go to that. So we evaluated that, created this in a computer-assisted drawing program. So this represents what the elevation in the yellow line at the bottom, that's the elevation of the heliport. And you can see that as it goes across the terrain. No terrain raises up more than 50 feet above that line. And specifically to your question, what we looked at was where the power lines were. And you see here, let me zoom in for you just a little bit, that the power lines are well below the 8:1 and well below the 12 degrees. Each one of these squares is basically 200 feet vertically, 1,000 feet horizontally. So we have over 500 feet of height above the power lines at a 12-degree approach departure for the aircraft as it comes in.
Can you address the vegetation issue too, because I had a question about that as well. It did indicate where the topographical information included the vegetation on those hills, because where the heliport is going to be is a grass field.
Correct.
And on those hills, there's 40 to 50 foot trees on top of that. So, I mean, I'm not sure that with the graphs it's a significant difference, but it is a difference.
I'll give you a good picture. So
Yep.
that's what the location looks like.
Right.
The topographical information presented in this report does not take vegetation into consideration.
Yeah.
In that space, though, we did evaluate those surrounding trees. Now, in the light of a couple of trees along the property line that the client owns on both sides, there were a couple trees that would, for the north approach departure path, need to be removed. For the south and the west, there were no trees in the way. Those were the only trees. I think we added up 3 trees that would have to be removed on that site. Once you go beyond about 80 feet, there's nothing out there that's higher than the required 8-to-1. So very, very minimal impact. This is about the highest point in that space right there.
Where the heliport is?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, it's probably the proudest part of the land in that area. Everything from that point slopes in all directions except for the east. And then this is the west approach departure path that we looked at. And what we saw there from the topography is that the heliport again was at the highest point. The land then slopes off about down to 950 feet. So about a little over 50 feet downslope throughout the entire area underneath the approach departure path. And on the 8-to-1, with that, it's well clear. There's the highest point again is the heliport itself. More than meets the FAA criteria. And when we looked at the 12 degrees at intercept, we're looking at about 918 feet above pad height at that point, at 4,000 feet out. There's a CAD representation of what that would look like. Again, very, very, very flat area, very favorable to aviation with limited interference from the terrain. Actually, zero interference from the terrain, if I may say. The south approach departure path, which was the one that we did realign for the Eagle's Nest. This is what that looks like underneath there. Again, the heliport under this approach departure path is the highest point. We do have some undulating terrain going out, but none that is higher than the heliport. When we look at the 8-to-1, the 8-to-1 is well clear. There's no penetrations whatsoever. It meets all FAA standards. When we looked at the 12 degrees, we were at about 887 feet above pad height at that point in the elevation in that approximate area. And I've discussed that with both the FAA and the Minnesota DOT, and they agreed that they did not see any issues with the airspace in comparison with the topography in this area. I think my FAA friend said he wished all his locations were this good. Any additional questions on the topography?
Commissioners have any additional questions at this point? Commissioner Robbie, Commissioner Watson?
None at this point.
Okay.
And then one additional thing that was asked is to look at the distances between several of the different residents in proximity to the approach departure paths as illustrated. So what we did was we pulled the GIS data from the map and the satellite view, and then went through and actually looked at what that distance was. And what we measure in this case was not the distance to the heliport, but the distance from where the aircraft would be closest on its approach departure path at altitude to each one of the residents. So in looking at that, we found that there were 3 that were under 500 feet. That would be location 1, 2, and 14. So 1 is the neighbor, 2 is the client's location, and then 14 is over here, all within that area. Every other house is beyond 500 feet, slant range distance to the aircraft on any of the approaches. In several cases, we're upwards of 900 feet to 1,000 feet in distance, based on the measurements of a 12-degree approach departure path. comments or questions on the distances?
Commissioner?
Rex, do you know where, Steve and Amy Domeyer live? They're on the northern road. I was just curious.
We're number 8. Steve, you can verify that in between 8 and 9.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. I think we're 8.
Okay, so if we look at number 8, we have 724 feet slant range of the aircraft at the closest point on approach or departure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
I think that was it for that one. And then the emergency action plan. This is a pretty standard plan. We follow the guidance out of the National Fire Protection Association 418 Heliport standards, and it's out of Appendix A, no, Appendix B, gives you criteria. So we basically have this is one that I designed for pretty much all of my clients, from the Department of Defense to hospitals to private citizens. It talks about the communications, fires, follow-ups, emergency response, what the local fire and law enforcement are, notification phone numbers for the FAA. FSDO stands for Flight Standards District Office. And then the NTSB has a 24-hour hotline that you can call and report an accident. And we talk about reporting, and the importance is if there were ever an accident from any aircraft, it's important to not move any of the debris except for the reasons for saving lives or allowing for traffic. Because then the NTSB and the FAA want to do an investigation. They want to see what that accident scene looked like before it was moved. So we list all those criteria out. Then things that individuals need to pay attention to before NTSB arrives, and we go through basic medical emergencies and natural disaster and security issues. So again, it's a fairly boilerplate standard right out of National Fire Protection Association's guidelines. And I would say that we would work with the first responders in the area. We also created the grid map, which is basically it's a search and rescue map of the area specifically designed for first responders in case of an incident. And then there's basic heliport general safety that we've added to this, which is best practice in line with what the Helicopter Association International and the U.S. Helicopter Safety Team recommends. Any questions on the emergency action plan as it stands?
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner?
I just wanted to thank you for that.
You're welcome.
We requested that, and I thought that came in very well done.
Thank you.
I thought.
Did you reach out to the local fire department?
Yes, I believe it has been done, but we want to follow up with them at the appropriate time. One of the things that we try to do is bring the first responders to the site and actually give them training and education on helicopters, what to do, what not to do, how to approach an aircraft and things like that.
And the law enforcement?
Exactly.
Well, the sheriff's office. My question is, on the teleport safety, would you post those around somewhere? Because, as you know, with helicopters, a great danger is people approaching them, the pilot can't see, or
Right.
when they're in maneuvering.
In most cases, if it's on private property, we go out of our way to make sure that we put some type of signage up somewhere. We have a recommendation for that. Basically, it's a sign that I helped develop in conjunction with ANSI and OSHA, and it's pretty straightforward. It's like, stay back 200 feet,
Right.
Noise and wind hazard, that sort of thing. We also recommend that we put something up on the premises that says private property kind of thing. And I know that in talking to the client, he said he would also have some type of closed circuit security system on site as well.
Because it's not going to be fenced,
No.
the property's not going to be fenced, so that's, when I was going through the safety recommendations, it's one thing that occurred to me about the signage, because people also are drawn to it, and
Helicopters can be a magnet, yeah.
Right.
I would point to the fact that fences are the number one thing at heliports that get hit by helicopters
Right.
because they're usually too
Maneuvering.
close and too high.
I would say, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, we did send the emergency plan to Elko New Market Fire Chief Todd Preges, and he did review the plan and he had no comments to it. We also sent it to the County Sheriff's Office and they looked at it. They concurred with it. They thought there might be a need for some type of signage to warn the public. We tried to make contact with that individual in the Sheriff's Office. We weren't able to do that yet. I don't know if he's meaning signage on public rights of way or on the property or what, so we'll follow up with him on that
okay.
question.
I'm sure it's along with what Mr. Alexander was alluding to about warning people, and even people who are not familiar with this. So.
And that is it for the emergency action plan. Any follow-on questions from anyone?
Do the commissioners have any further questions for Mr. Alexander on the plan, the emergency safety plan? Okay.
And then the other item that was requested was the lighting plan. And it's fairly straightforward. It's a one-page document. We talked about what the FAA requires from the advisory circular. There's an engineering brief. It's called engineering brief number 87. Talks about the lighting for heliports. Specifically talks about green lighting. We now use LEDs versus incandescent. They last much longer than the incandescent. The heliport design guide points to circular pads requiring 8 evenly spaced lights on the perimeter. And that gives the pilot ample depth perception when landing and taking off with the lights on. And the ones that we were looking at in this particular case were the ones that were flush mount. The lights are designed so that they are very visible to the pilot on approach. So there's a photometrics that allow the light to shine up and out, but not so much flat or down. So there'd be very limited light to anyone that was at an even height of the light. And given that most of the terrain drops off, most people would never be able to see that. And also it'd be blocked in most cases by the terrain itself, as you can see on the topography. And the client's looking at putting something in place that allows the lights to be turned on only when needed. And then once the operation is completed, the lights would then be turned off. So you're probably only looking at a few minutes. Most hospitals that I work with, we put them on for a dawn to dusk light. And then lights comes on. When the sun goes down, the lights go off. When the sun comes up, in this case, we would not do that. Any questions on the lighting systems?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Commissioner
There was,
Johnson.
when I went out to the site, there was one house that was probably to the east, probably the closest to this heliport.
Right.
Now, the house is higher, probably look down on this. So those lights wouldn't bother them.
I looked at that. I did not see that the lights were going to be an effect on that particular house. If they were in the second story, maybe they could see it, but on ground level, definitely not.
But they're not going to be on, just, they're going to
No,
be
they're not going to be
triggered.
on all the time, only when necessary.
Okay.
Any other questions, commissioners, on the lighting? Okay, can move on.
Okay, I think the last thing that was discussed was the weather. Somebody had asked specifically about that. This is out of the federal regulations. This is the weather criteria that they speak to. Let's see. I don't want that on there, you can't see. So the key to the weather is we talk about VFR. VFR stands for Visual Flight Rules. Visual flight rules are for visual meteorological conditions, meaning you can see where you're going. Now, the FAA breaks down airspace multiple ways. So the airspace around Minneapolis, St. Paul would be what we refer to as Class B. A smaller airport may be Class C, and then a small towered airport would be Class D or Delta. Now, in our case, there's no airport, so the airspace is quantified as Class G or Gulf. So in Class G airspace, up at the top, you see the different day and night. The first line is specifically for airplanes, and the next area you see is for helicopters. So daytime, a helicopter can fly legally under federal aviation regulations in Class G airspace with a half a mile of visibility, and as long as it remains clear of clouds. Now for nighttime operations, he can fly with 1 mile of visibility and clear clouds in Class G. So I would say that in talking to the client that he does not plan on flying in weather that's that low. He wants to fly in weather that he can maximize his efforts. And I'm sure he will speak to that if you ask him what his conditions are. But those are what the FAA say are the minimum weather criteria. Now, as far as how would the client or the pilot know what the weather is, he would call up the nearest weather reporting station that's an FAA certified AWOS. AWOS stands for Aviation Weather Observation System. And it would report to him what the ceilings and the visibility, along with temperature, dew point, winds, wind speeds, wind direction, and altimeter setting. And most of those are operational 24 hours a day. You can call them on the phone. You can also bring them up on the internet, and you can usually dial them on your radio while you're flying and listen to them over the radio. And there are multiple ones in and around the area that you can find out what the weather is throughout the area as you're flying through it. Any questions on weather limits as set forth by the FAA?
What happens when you fall out of VFR conditions and, you know, it happens?
Oh, yeah.
Weather
No,
changes.
I've been in that situation myself.
Sure.
So the key there is being vigilant so that you don't get into below VFR minimums. You either land somewhere close, you turn around and go home, or if you're on the ground, you don't take off at all. And that's the key. I mean, that's being proactive in that space.
Thank you. Any other questions, Mr. Alexander, at this point? Okay.
I think that wraps up all the things that you'd requested.
Thank you. We may have further questions as we move on, and I'll have Mr. Schmitz come back up here and discuss conditions and
So all of you received staff's conditions, draft conditions for the Planning Commission meeting here. Just going through those, I won't hit on every one of them. I will just hit on the conditions where we made changes. Condition 1, we left consistent with the language that was in the permit back in September. Condition number 2, we did add that the Planning Commission may review the CUP. along with the township. One of the items in condition 2 that a number of the area residents have mentioned is the word may, that the conditional use permit may be annually reviewed by the planning commission. They would like to see the word shall incorporated there. The reason staff used may is we were just thinking in the future, if there weren't any issues, would this board want to take time to actually do a review or not? So totally up to your discretion there if you would want to modify that condition. Condition number 3 stayed the same. That essentially says if we adopt an inspection ordinance that has a fee attached to it, that the applicant would pay that fee. Currently, we do not have an ordinance like that. Condition number 4 stayed largely the same. We did change the language a little bit there to add an helicopter to the language. Condition 5 is a new condition. The CUP is issued on the 40-acre parcel as legally described on the survey dated August 18, 2020. The applicant's homestead and the helipad shall remain on a single parcel. The idea is there, we did not want the homestead to be separated from the helipad so that the helipad might be sold off separate from the homestead. We wanted to keep them as one piece. Condition number 6 was modified. If the property is sold, the new owner shall contract the Scott County Planning Department to review the conditions of the CUP to officially transfer the permit. That way we would meet with whoever is buying the property, make sure that their helicopter was consistent noise-wise with what the applicant had, was a light-duty helicopter similar to what the applicant had. If it was greatly different, they'd have to reopen the conditional use permit.
Mr. Chairman? I have a question with that one.
Johnson.
Is that open-ended, or could we put, if it isn't used in a year, it goes away? Or 6 months or something?
Yeah, you could add some language to that effect if the helipad, if the applicant sells the property and does not use the helipad, that it could, this conditional use permit could go away. I imagine we could include language like that.
The cement?
No, the whole,
No.
the use. The
No,
CUP.
that's the CUP.
Or the use of it?
Yeah, just use of it. They say property gets sold, so I don't have a helicopter, I don't need to use it.
Well, doesn't a CUP go with the property?
Yes.
CUP does go with the property, and if the new owner had a helicopter and was going to utilize it, I think what Commissioner Johnson's saying, if they did not have a helicopter and they weren't going to be using the helipad, that the conditional use permit would go away, rather than it continuing to run there into the future.
I mean, 10 years after they sell it, maybe somebody say, oh, I guess I could have a.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Condition 7 we modified to make it more specific to the applicant. The heliport shall be limited for private use of one Bell 206, and then we give the tail number helicopter owned by the applicant. No other helicopters shall use the helipad or be stored at the applicant's property. If the applicant wishes to change the type of helicopter used for the private use of the helipad, the applicant shall contact Scott County Planning Department to review the conditions of the CUP. Here again, to make sure that the new helicopter is consistent with noise and size information we have on the existing one. Condition 8, here we made a fairly significant change. The use of the heliport shall be limited to 2 takeoffs and 2 landings per day and 50 takeoffs and 50 landings per calendar year, where before we had 84. On 4 days per calendar year, the number of takeoffs and landings may exceed 2. This is another condition which you've gotten numerous comments on, requesting that the heliport be limited to 1 takeoff, 1 landing per day. Staff did not make that change. We felt with the limitation of 50 takeoffs and landings annually, we felt that was adequate. Here again, another condition that the planning commission could modify. Number 9, the heliport and helicopter operations defined as when the helicopter engine is running can only be used during daylight hours. Daylight hours for this permit shall consist of 1/2 hour before sunrise and 1/2 hour after sunset. And then we added, in no case shall the heliport and helicopter operations be used prior to 7 a.m. throughout the entire calendar year. And that was in reaction to a number of the comments we got at the previous hearing. You also received comments from a number of individuals looking at a hard stop in the evening for operations. You received some comments about limiting operations on Sundays and possibly even on weekends altogether. Number 10, the heliport shall comply with all NPCA noise standards. If the county receives multiple complaints on noise within a calendar year, the applicant at his expense shall cover the cost for the county to contract an independent noise consultant to measure noise levels in the impact area and provide a report. If exceedances are occurring, the noise consultant shall provide mitigation measures to resolve the exceedance. So here we change this condition to essentially say the county will hire the noise consultant, but the applicant will pay for it rather than have the applicant hire the noise consultant.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah,
Why did
Commissioner?
you take out the word valid? I mean, people would just call up and say this and demand.
I think it was, what's a valid complaint? I mean, you also have that going for it. So we put complaints. I think it'd be up to staff to determine if it's legitimate, if it's consistent. Staff would have to make that determination. Condition 11 did not change. Prior to operation of the heliport, the applicant shall receive MnDOT approval and a license to operate. A copy of the license shall be provided to the county. Condition 12, the applicant shall follow FAA requirements for the private heliport and helicopter operations. Number 13 has been reworded some here. To limit the impact on residents, livestock, and power lines, the applicant shall only use the FAA recommended approach departure paths from the south and west, unless weather conditions warrant use of the north flight path. So we received a number of comments at both the public hearing and after the public hearing about that north flight path. It does seem to be the flight path that has the most residents along it. So we're recommending that the south and west paths be used unless weather conditions would warrant the use of that north path.
Mr. Chairman, Marty, I just have to ask, that north flight path, if I was listening, on the north departure, they have to remove some trees. We've got the power lines there. When you looked at the homes that were close, there were 10 homes on the north flight path and only 4 on the south and 4 on the west. Couldn't we just eliminate the north flight path? That's where the bulk of the people live that were really upset about this. And it leaves the south and the west, and I'm hearing those were really good flight paths for in and out, and I just think it might do a lot to settle everything down and have this be more comfortable for everybody.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Henches, we could remove the north flight path. I did contact MnDOT Aeronautics with that question. If the north flight path got eliminated, would they still license the heliport? And their answer was yes, they would. However, we felt it might be appropriate to keep in there for emergency use.
Well, I saw you said weather conditions, and of course I'm thinking, well, if it's bad enough that you can't go south and west, why would you want to go north with the weather conditions? I just think we had such an outcry over this, and I think that the applicant is trying really hard to do this well, and this would just eliminate so many issues for a lot of people. At least it would show that everybody listened and tried to make it the best we could.
And you're absolutely right, Commissioner Henches. This is probably the condition we've had the most comments on is related to the North Flight path. Moving on through the conditions that staff drafted. Condition 15, to ensure compliance with the Eagle Act, the applicant shall not operate the helicopter within 1,000 feet of the existing known eagle's nest during the breeding season. I did a little search just to find out what the breeding season is for eagles in Minnesota, and what I found was roughly mid to late December through late February, early March. So from the time they start working on their nest to the time they complete breeding. So those would roughly be the time frame where we'd have to maintain that 1,000-foot separation. Oh, did I? I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you, Glenn. Number 14, the applicant shall maintain the Bell 206 L4 tail number following manufacturer's requirements and specifications. All major repair and maintenance of the helicopter will be performed at a separate licensed maintenance facility. Maintenance records shall be provided to the county upon request. That condition was drafted because of comments we received regarding when you have major work done on a helicopter and then they have to test fly it. Concern for safety of the area if there was a problem on that test flight. So that was the reason for that condition. Number 16, the applicant shall schedule inspections and obtain any required hazardous waste license as required from Scott County Environmental Services Department. That would be for anything like keeping of hazardous materials on the property, fuel, those sorts of things. Number 17, the applicant shall not hover helicopter over private property except his own property. Figuring he would need to hover to land and take off the helicopter. Number 18, if it is demonstrated that livestock are disturbed by the takeoff and landing of the applicant's helicopter, the applicant shall meet with the livestock owner and mitigate the disruption. The applicant shall be responsible for injuries to livestock, economic damage caused by livestock due to disruption created by the applicant's helicopter. And that was our attempt to try and put something in there that would tie the applicant to impacts to livestock. So this was staff's shot at that. And then 19, the applicant shall solely use the helipad located on the site plan and survey dated August 18, 2020. On this survey, he identifies a helipad on the southern portion of his property, the property he's purchasing from the Lovelets. So that's the only location he can take off and land on his property. He can land on his driveway or in the pad that he had previously poured. Those are the conditions staff has drafted. One item staff has talked about, if this moves forward to the board with recommendation of approval, would be to modify condition 1. It essentially requires the applicant to file with Scott County Planning Office in January of each year a letter stating that they're in compliance with the conditions of the conditional use permit as issued. We would include information in here where the applicant would provide a log of the days, times that he flew from the helipad, which flight path he used, and if he did use the north flight path, the condition stayed in as it was worded. What were the weather conditions that warranted the use of that north flight path? So we would look at making that modification if this moves forward to the board for approval. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Commissioner.
Mr. Chair, Marty, would you go over number 2 again?
So essentially what number 2 says is the conditional use permit may be annually reviewed by the Planning Commission, and the CUP may be annually reviewed by the town board at a time and in a manner as prescribed by Cedar Lake Township. And prior we only had that the CUP could be reviewed by the town board in a time and a manner as prescribed, but because Cedar Lake isn't taking an active stance on a lot of these conditional use permits, we received a number of comments feeling that the Planning Commission should review the conditional use permit. So that's the reason for the language change. I know that was a comment by a number of the commissioners here last month.
Okay. Let me just vent a little bit here. Us board members, we sometimes rely on input from our township supervisors. And even if it's items that are on the consent agenda, like Louisville Township tonight, they have a representative here. And take Louisville Township, Sand Creek Township, Jackson Township, Helena Township, St. Lawrence Township, Belle Plaine Township, Blakely Township, Spring Lake Township. If they have someone in their jurisdiction here, they usually show up and they do their homework and are committed. Now here we are, 2 months in a row, Cedar Lake Township. Were any of your supervisors here tonight, Glenn?
No, they're not here. They don't feel that this is their responsibility. That's their view, right? So they believe that this planning and zoning issue is an issue for this board. It's not their responsibility. They're a road authority. And so they say, this is not their determination, their decision, it's yours. I'm not saying it. That's their view.
Three elected officials who get paid to, and all they do worry about is the road.
That's what they're governed to do.
Pardon me?
That's their responsibility.
Yeah, and same thing in New Market Township. We had a New Market Township tonight and not one representative. And, you know, Glenn, I like to do my homework. When there's issues throughout Scott County, I have a lot of these township supervisors on my phone and I can get the inside scoop on what's going on. But we don't get anything from Cedar Lake Township. I'm sorry, I'm disgusted with it. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, and I don't know, Marty, or maybe is the person that's a consultant on the helicopter, on the flight plans, they say weather conditions. I assume that's mostly wind. I mean, if it's a thunderstorm and low cover, they wouldn't go.
Yeah, Rex
But
might be better.
Mostly a wind issue, I would think.
Yes, Commissioner Huber, Rex might be better suited to answer that question than I, but I would assume too it's mainly a wind-related item.
No, you would be absolutely correct. If the weather was such that the visibility of the ceiling or thunderstorm, the operation wouldn't be conducted. What we look for is the maximum number of approach departure paths possible so that the pilot can operate into a headwind whenever possible, or at the very worst case, a crosswind, 90 degrees left or right. MnDOT does have a requirement for 2 approach departure paths with a minimum of 90 degrees. That allows for wind conditions and different types of wind conditions. Whenever we can, we try to get 135 degrees separation, or in this case, with the terrain that it is, we could get 3. That allows for maximum safety for wind conditions. So in the case of the north approach departure path that was in question, if the wind was out of the south at say 15 knots, it would completely be safe to fly, but it would be highly prudent on the pilot's part to shoot that approach from the north to the south into the wind.
So it's going into the wind anyway. That's why probably you don't have anything from the east, because very seldom in this part of the country, the wind coming out of the east.
Historical winds in this area and checking with NOAA's wind data are, yeah.
We assume on the south and west and maybe northwest.
West, northwest is the predominant winds. There's some out of the south, but with the 3 approaches, that gives multiple options in any wind condition.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner?
I'm sorry, let's get back to number 2 again. I went on this rant about Cedar Lake Township. So let's pinpoint something here on this. Instead of this May. So first of all, does anyone have to review it once a year?
With the language of may, no, you wouldn't have to review it once a year. If we put shall, then we do need to review this every year, yes.
But is it going to be reviewed by the township or the planning commission?
Well, if we put shall in the area that I have circled, it would mean the planning commission will review it every year. The town board, you know, it's really up to them. We have the CUP may be annually reviewed by the township at a time and in a manner as prescribed by Cedar Lake Town Board. That's pretty consistent with what we put on all conditional use permits in the unincorporated area, is that the township would have the ability to review it. Typically, that's where the review is done, and it's not done at this board. Here, because of Cedar Lake Township's position, the amount of concern with this conditional use permit, I know a couple of the commissioners did mention the County Planning Commission look at doing a review of the permit.
Mr. Chairman, Marty, I
Commissioner
was
Henches.
one that was concerned about the township board, so I'm fine with the may instead of should. We don't want to be burdened with doing it every year, whether there's a reason to or not, but I think that putting it for both of us, the planning commission and the township board, and using the word may, means that if there's an issue, we can address it.
I'm going to weigh in. I think it should be shall. And the reason I'm saying that is it's the first Heliport we've had. And now whether it's done administratively or ultimately up to the planning commission, I think that there needs to be ongoing monitoring of this. This is 19 conditions, 20 conditions on this, and we want to make sure that with these conditions that it works and what doesn't work. And I think if we put in there may, you know, if it, you know, we have required people to come back and on conditions before, so.
And Mr. Chair, Commissioners, it could be a very quick review if there aren't any complaints and there aren't any issues
Exactly.
here. It might just be a copy of the applicant's annual letter to us stating, you know, here's the information, when he took off, when he landed, what days it was, what flight path he used.
Right.
Mr. Chair, but you have to remember, we're all familiar with this, but we just put in if we want to be on the board again, but we could all be gone next year, so then you have to kind of review everything.
This is true.
Keep in mind.
That's true.
Mr. Chair, could that be handled, so coming directly to us, you know, can come to us, but getting it handled administratively with county staff? Or should we do that, or not, Marty?
I'll let Marty.
I guess that's up to you. I mean, we have the ability to review conditional use permits at any time. As staff, if we get complaints, we're involved in the review of that conditional use permit. So I think this condition is meant for a board review rather than a staff review. Yeah.
I just think that in light of this, that, you know, that would be appropriate. That's my feeling on it.
Well, I'll bow to our chairman and change my vote to shall.
I mean, it's,
Mr. Chairman, this is Lee Watson.
yeah, Lee. Commissioner Watson.
I would, on number 2, I agree. I think may should be shall.
Okay.
A question for Marty on number 18 with regard to livestock disruptions. Should a injury and or loss of livestock occur due to the helicopter? What would be the process for compensation? Is that an insurance process or is it a legal process? And where does the burden of proof rest?
Good question, Commissioner Watson. Probably both. I think the idea behind the condition is that we have something in the permit that requires the applicant to meet with the impacted property owner, and hopefully they can work out any solutions before it gets to the point where an animal dies or breaks its leg or something along those lines, and we don't get to that point. But if we would, it may well be a legal matter or an insurance matter that, quite honestly, as staff, we don't have a lot of control over.
So this is just a first step.
Yeah.
Try to address it and get it to go away.
Yes, Commissioner henches. That is the idea. If there are issues being created, the applicant needs to meet with that property owner, and maybe he adjusts his flights based on that, or goes at a higher approach departure to avoid those livestock areas.
Mr. Chairman, is number
Johnson.
3 brand new, and shouldn't that be in red then?
No, number 3 is not brand new. That was part of the conditions from September, and actually it's a consistent condition that's
Okay.
in all of our conditional use permits and has been probably for the past 7 or 8 years.
Okay. So do you want to go over some of these issues?
Yes.
Okay, you
Yeah,
want to lead
just-
that?
Go ahead.
Um,
You have the floor.
Okay. I like the idea that it's one piece of property, and that was number 5. Number 6, we were going to perhaps put a time limit on for the CUP. I don't know if you want to do 6 months or a year, so that if it's not used, that it goes away, not run with the land in perpetuity. And hours of operation seems to kind of be a bone of contention. I don't think we discussed that too much. It just says half an hour before sunrise. And most people, or a lot of people are saying 7 to 7. Maybe we should kind of discuss that and see what.
Okay, let's open it for discussion. Commissioner Hartman,
I'd be more in favor of 7 to 10.
that would extend it actually longer than it is.
Yeah,
For me?
That would go after
10
sunset.
PM.
I know, but it sunsets before 10 PM. It's half an hour before sunset.
And a lot of people are asking us to do 7 to 7.
7 to 7.
Which is,
We have the 7 AM start, and then there's no, and at the other end of it is sunset, which of course in August is
10 o'clock.
9:30, whatever it is. I don't know, it's half an hour before sunset. And so some people have requested, if I'm stating this properly, 7 AM to 7 PM, and which would be a reduction from what's stated here.
and then in the wintertime, 7 PM is totally dark.
Oh,
so-
5:30, 4:30 is daylight hours, really, in December. You know, so we do have that wide range in the evening hours.
Just a procedural question. I know you're talking about the conditions, but at some point we do have the public here that will want to speak to some of these conditions. So they've asked, will there be an opportunity to speak? So I just want to remind the chair of that.
Yes, did they, Davis, is there somebody designated who would speak?
Yeah.
To the group?
Yep.
Okay, we will have them come up. And perhaps now is before we get, and I'll go return the floor to Commissioner Johnson, but if there is someone from the public who has been designated to speak on these conditions, and they're, I would have them come up. It's not a public hearing, but we can recognize people who want to just address these conditions here. Is there someone here who would like to speak?
I don't think there's been one person that's been designated. I think most people here have some comments to make.
I had called to understand what would be allowed to be speaking. It was my understanding that yes, we would, that there would not be a designated speaker, because we asked that question, and so I apologize if I misunderstood, but I didn't.
Right.
Not designate anybody for Hunter's Lane, because that was not our understanding of the requirement.
Well, again, this is, we thought there'd be kind of,
We don't want to, a lot of this I've noticed is repetition.
right, there's a lot of same people have expressed the same concerns or common concerns. I would like to hear from somebody up here who kind of captures the majority of those. If those are not captured, if there's things that are not captured by the group, then someone else can come up and address that. And specifically on the conditions that we're discussing right now. So there's someone who can do that here.
I can represent Hunter's Lane.
Okay, you want to come up?
Maybe Elizabeth
Okay.
is my neighbor as well.
Okay, again, sign in and start with your name. And what we'd like to do is, I know that many of all the commissioners have received letters from everyone over the past few weeks, or from many letters, and many of the conditions that were requested or their concerns with the conditions were very similar. So as we go down and cover these, if something is not covered that you have a concern about, then come up and do that. Good evening.
Good evening. So Steve Delmeyer, at 4215 Hunters Lane, Webster. So kind of representing the Hunters Lane or Hunters Crest community. So thank you, Mr. Chair and staff for allowing me to speak tonight. And thanks to the staff for listening to our comments. So they have addressed some of them. We just don't feel like they fully addressed all the questions that we've really had for that. I think one of them being the flight route. Obviously, to the north, we know that we'd like that completely removed. I think that that's been brought up by Ms. Hedges, and I appreciate that. But we'd like to see that completely removed. We feel that there's only 2 flight paths required. I think we've heard that, and we just would like to see that northern one removed. I think that there's horses that Elizabeth has, and it would be best for that area. It's the most populated area, and we'd like to see, again, that one gone. The south obviously would be the preferred flight path. I think by most all of us would agree that that probably makes the most sense here and where we're at. I think one of the comments we've had, and you might hear, is the eastern flight route. I think that we heard last time that there was a lot of people for, or neighbors for, this helipad that lived in, that were maybe neighbors of Doug. And so we'd just fly that direction. I think even the west impacts our Hunters Lane neighborhood as well, and so getting to the south and going to the east would limit that. And I think 9 out of 10 of us in our neighborhood, and not including even Elizabeth, are probably for that. And I just want to comment that there are a lot of people that are also against that didn't sign, that didn't come here, that weren't as vocal as us. But I think if you really got a census of the people out there, most people are against this in the neighborhood. There might be some that are for, but I think by and large most people are against it. There's just some more vocal than others out there. Flight times, I think we appreciate that the staff just the flight time to 7 a.m., but we feel like there should be a nighttime. If I ever get back downtown, right, to go to work again, I go to work, leave my house at about 5 in the morning. So I go to bed very early at night, 9 o'clock at night. So 10 o'clock at night is probably pretty unrealistic for me to have helicopters coming over our home. We experienced it last summer, and it is quite loud. The house does vibrate when you come over. And so there's really no way for us to mitigate that noise. So I just take that. Days of operation, I think we've asked for Monday through Saturday. I think that there's some that maybe would like to see Monday through Friday. We've heard from Doug in a letter that this was basically for his business. And so with that, most people probably doesn't need to fly on Saturday. And I think at a minimum, we think Sunday's a day that we should ask that there are no flights on that. Operations, I think the only thing I'd ask for on that, 50 years, so thanks for staff for making that change. We just asked to just no more than 1 flight per day. I think one of the things that we found for ourselves is we're pretty vested in this, and when the flight goes over, it really disrupts your day to the point that doesn't leave you with a great feeling, right? So if that's happening multiple times a day, I think we'd be even more frustrated to see that happening. So and just to clarify, I think it's an operation we're allowing, so that's an up and a down in a 24-hour period or in one period. So that is actually 2 times he's going up or he could go up and come down in the same day is what I would say. The helipad placement, I think, is we're on the north, we'd like to see that helipad is placed as far south in the property as possible. Again, there appears to be the less populated area, and that would again remove the noise even farther from us. Where the shed is placed, I don't know that I have any preference on where the shed is placed. I think we just ask the helipad is placed as far south on the property as zoning or setbacks might allow, I guess. The review, we'd ask that should be shall, just so that this gets brought back up. I think the last thing that you're going to hear from a lot of us is a test flight. We know what this was like last year. He flew over our home. I know that in the north flight path, he'd be actually a little bit farther east of where he flew last year. But come out to our neighborhood, meet with our neighbors, and listen to it. Come out here and hear us. Come out here and listen to that. I heard a lot about noise in County Road 2 and semis and jake braking and all that stuff, right? Come out and hear a helicopter flying over our homes. We're out there, we're the ones that actually have to live with this. So, come out here and hear us, and not just, I know some of it have driven through, and Mr. Wolf has driven through the neighborhood as well. There's been others, commissioners that have talked, that we've spoke to that have driven through, but nobody's heard this helicopter actually take off and listen to that time when he used to start the engine up, let that warm up, take off, come over our homes, and then again, same thing, landing and that, cooling down of that engine. So that's really what I would ask for that. we're just passionate about this, and we'd ask that, you know, I think we think that these conditions we've asked for are reasonable. They're certainly under the purview of the CUP. They are, they're just reasonable conditions, I think. We're the ones that have to live with this, so we'd ask that you take into account us, our homes, our home values, and, you know, just our sanity, having to live with this after this is approved.
Okay.
So I think that's everything I have.
Thank you very much. Anyone else like to add additional information? This is on these that has not been covered.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I just want to reiterate what Steve just said, 100%. I live on 26340 Wildwood Drive. I'm kind of in the middle of the Wildwood Ponds neighborhood, very close to the heliport. And our life does get disrupted by the helicopter, there's no doubt about it. I kind of personally represent everyone that's opposed to the heliport in our neighborhood, and a number of people, since I collected a large number of petitions as I went around and surveyed people. And as Steve said, you know, I'd say conservatively 90% of the people that live within a mile of the heliport do not want it there, and it's exactly what he said. When it flew in and out multiple times, exactly a year ago right now, it was very disruptive to the area.
Mr. Chairman, what's his name?
Lauren Balls.
Lauren Balls.
Another thing that just came up just previously about Cedar Lake Township, I did go to the township meeting last Monday night, and we did talk about the township weighing in. They are, for some reason, deathly afraid of being sued. But all three board members said they are opposed to the heliport being sited in Cedar Lake Township. And they all three said they'd be calling Brad Davis and telling him so the next day, Tuesday of last week. Is that correct, Brad?
I heard from one of them, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, they all, at a public forum, said they were opposed to the heliport, but not wanting to enter risk into our small Cedar Lake Township. I have a lot of information available tonight on sound. I have the exact charts from Bell Helicopter that shows the propagation of sound going out through our neighborhood. It's extreme. It impacts many, many homes over 1,000 to 1,200 foot range on all sides of where the helicopter's at. And I think everyone will be very interested in seeing that. If you'd like to see it now, or I can come back up in a few minutes.
Well, we're trying to focus on the conditions.
Okay.
On
We started getting a little off track
on the
there.
applicable
A couple
conditions
things I
right
wanted to
now
get out
that
there,
we have under discussion right
We
now.
do not want unlimited use on those 4 days. There's going to be a circus there, there's going to be a party, everybody's going to take a ride on the helicopter, a barbecue, birthday party for Doug and Kelly's daughters, whatever. We want that stricken completely. Everyone I've talked to said that's a requirement that makes zero sense. It's a huge liability to our neighborhood and everyone involved.
Okay.
And I think
Any conditions that have
I
not
think
been
that we
covered?
should avoid the eagle's nest 12 months out of the year. What I read about the breeding season, that it was about 9 months long, not just a few short months. I don't know where that information came from, but I think
I'll
if we
verify that with
disturb that
staff.
nest at any time, it's a travesty to our nature in the area. So
Okay.
I think all the rest of them that were at question have been covered. Thank you
Okay.
very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Paul.
Thank you.
All right, my name's Daryl Woods, and I live on Hunter's Lane, and I am opposed to this heliport. When we bought the house, we signed and closed on August the 5th. We weren't told there was a heliport, and lo and behold, we're there with our puppy at the house, enjoying our country lifestyle, and there's a damn helicopter beating over our house, landing at an illegal heliport that apparently he doesn't have to destroy, he gets to leave in, and I've been told by county staff, he won't use it because he said he won't use it. Well, I would have thought somebody in construction would have pulled a permit to build something like that. He didn't do it. What about the building he wants to store the helicopter in now? Did he pull a permit for that? You know, I don't see him obeying any of the basic county regulations to try and be a good neighbor to anybody, at all.
Is there anything on the conditions that you'd like to ask?
Yes,
Mr.
there
Woods?
are some conditions I
Okay.
could have. I don't want him flying Saturday or Sunday.
Okay,
In his propaganda letter, he said it was for his commute to get to work.
okay.
You
What
know,
else?
I work Monday through Friday most of the time. There are emergencies. You know, there are, things come up. I understand that, but we don't need to make it regular. I think one landing, one takeoff per day.
Okay.
Again, like Steve said, put it on the southernmost boundary of that 14 acres he's buying from that couple. Don't put it on top of the hill. Aerodynamically or aeronautically, whatever the term is, that might be the best place for it. That does not help us with our noise. And then, you know, we've got valleys and hills out there. We've got vegetation. This guy that was hired that's in the East Coast somewhere with this supposed noise study, did he take that into account? Is he on flat ground out at an airport? I don't even know what he did. I'm asking all of y'all that are on this committee, please come out, have Doug fly a test flight, have a noise study person there so y'all can experience what you're going to subject us to if you approve this. It's very disturbing if you're expecting some quiet country living. Who's going to keep track of his takeoffs and landings? Are we going to wait for him to turn in his letter at the end of the year to see if he counted correctly? He didn't pull a permit. Why should I expect to believe him now? Y'all are putting a lot of faith in this. He's already demonstrated otherwise. You know, Hunter's Lane, we're not even in that subdivision, and yet he has a flight path over it. Get rid of the northern flight path. 2 of the 3 flight paths they submitted have to get around those very high power lines. Why wasn't the east even mentioned? You know, the hired expert said that a crosswind would work, so if we have a wind out south, he can fly east. His expert also stated that only visual standards for flying. Well, if there's only visual standards for flying, what does that have to do with the wind? Do you see the wind? You know, he can choose to fly out of the north every day and say, oh, well, I could see that way. You know, if that's at his discretion. And apparently there was a noise study submitted to y'all. I don't know if the public is going to get a chance to see that. Is that any sort of violation of a Public Meetings Act?
No, it's not.
Okay, well, I didn't know that.
Yeah, no.
And condition 15 about the breeding, I don't think it should be only breeding. And I think that's probably right, December through February for the breeding of the eagles. But after they're done breeding, what happens? They lay eggs, they raise their little ones. So I think that's where Lauren is talking about being the 9 months or whatever it is. So I don't think they breed for 9 months, but they do have activities around that nest, not just for breeding. Something that I did appreciate was when Commissioner Henches mentioned, you know, that she had an issue with one of the conditions, and I can't remember what the number is. I don't have the list of conditions here.
Sure.
And she was asking questions about it. Marty just seemed to skip over it and ignore that. I mean, I'm hoping y'all discuss that. I mean, thank you very much, Donna. I greatly appreciate that. But it seemed like it was just being glossed over.
Right. Well,
So-
we're in discussion of all the conditions right now. you
Okay.
know, So this is the point.
All right, and, you know, just any of the conditions. Just because someone fills out a CUP doesn't mean you must grant that, does it?
No, it does not.
Okay. You're trying to benefit one person for his own personal gain.
We're focusing
And-
on the conditions right now, Daryl.
Okay. And negatively impacting all of us.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comments. Is there anything else that was not covered? Okay. Very good. Would you like to make a comment here? I believe the applicant would like to also comment as well on these. Let's focus our discussion on, it's still, Commissioner Johnson still has the floor. And so we're on the item of conditions right now, and that's where we're at right now.
Okay, well, good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Thanks again for your time. You know, I heard you guys talk and I understand concerns. Couple things as far as flying at 9:30 at night last August, that didn't happen from me. I don't know who it was, but my helicopter was not in the country. I can prove that. I can prove it with border documents, whatever you'd like. Either way, nonetheless, with all of our differences on this, I want to try and please you guys. I want to try and work with you and get this done amicably. So ask Rex to try and come up with one other flight plan, okay? And going to the, you know, aside from trying to explain everything, going to the east just, I mean, for obstacles, it doesn't work. So that kind of, going to the north, again, I've been shut down on using the north approach departure path unless weather warrants that it's necessary for safety. And I'm going to respect that with the utmost certainty. The last thing I want is a bunch of people complaining and coming after me to try and shut me down on this, okay? And I do have a permit for the building that was built. Currently, the green represents the existing approach departure path that was sent to you guys. That's what's in question tonight. Marty, I don't want to have to reopen this or postpone this at all. If we needed to review a different proposed flight plan that goes more to the east, then I would hope that we approve the south and west and conditions and move forward, and maybe this north plan is contingent if you guys feel this is a better plan. I just want you to know that there is another FAA option available that we came up with. Currently, this is 800 feet from the Dolmeyers. This would be 1,209 feet.
We can't see what you're doing with your hand there.
Oh, really?
On our screens.
I
So
have
you have to use this one.
Oh,
and
I'm
everyone
sorry.
can see, I believe.
Gotcha. So currently, green path is 800 feet from the Dolmeyers in that neighborhood. Dolmeyers are in the eastern side of that neighborhood, so others would probably get further. But the new path that I'm trying to propose, if it would please everybody and try and show a concession here, because it's not real conducive to have to fly radiuses, but again, I'm trying. The new plan, the closest point of which that revised path would be to the Dolmeyers would be 1,209 feet. People are talking about flying on Saturdays and Sundays, you know, that we've proven that this is no different than, it's actually less decibel levels in motorcycles. And I don't tell people that they can or cannot ride motorcycles or snowmobiles or muscle cars on Saturdays and Sundays. I think that's, just don't think that's right. There's 19 conditions here. I'm being limited in how many times I can do this per year. I feel, yeah. I'll kind of leave it at that. I want to give you
Okay.
another option for the north, which actually this would kind of become a north and northeast. There's,
I have a question for you.
yes,
Do you record every time you fly?
yes,
Okay.
yes. You can also go to flighttracker.com
Right.
and you can track
I know.
my min numbers.
I know that. So when the county staff was talking about self-reporting on this, is that a difficult thing for you to do?
No, I got to do it anyways.
You have to do it, right?
Correct.
Okay, that was just something I wanted to know about, how you were looking at that. Because obviously, if we're talking about multiple times a year, which this is, and this is CUP, you would have to report on it to us annually, on when your flights were, where they were and which flight route you used, that kind of thing. But that, you collecting that data, obviously, and that can be independently checked also, correct?
Correct, and I mean, yes, there'd be a different log I would create just for this, because it sounds like you guys are interested in what flight paths I'm using, whether it's north, south.
Right, which is something you wouldn't need to do.
So I just create a
for your
different
log.
log, and I would have no problem keeping that for you.
That's my only question.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Dave.
Thank you.
Okay, I am returning the floor at this time to Commissioner Johnson, and I am very grateful for you for your.
Okay, we were talking about the evening, because in our country, you know, it can get dark at 5 o'clock. And so, do we want to put hours when you can come and go? We didn't discuss that.
I definitely support the not before 7 a.m.
Yeah.
Because I just think that, you know, that's pretty much.
I agree. I think the 7 a.m. is critical.
So
But I'm okay with half an hour after sunset, but 7 a.m. is important.
I'm okay with the same thing.
Realizing that half an hour before sunset is
It's a moving target.
pretty late at night sometimes.
Yeah, half an hour after sunset in the summer. I don't know what the latest sunset is, but I'm sure it's be around here, 9:30. Would you think somewhere? So that puts us close to 10 o'clock so when you were talking about 10 o'clock, that's literally what's written in here at this point.
I guess I don't like the 10 p.m. in the summer.
Mr. Chairman, this is Robbie.
Yes, Commissioner Robbie.
I think a time rather than putting half hour after sunset or half hour before sunrise, you know, that can be a lot of different people's determination. I guess I reflect on the DNR hunting synopsis. They have day by day what the different times are. I think it'd be to our advantage to designate a certain time and not this half hour business. That's kind of my take on it.
Well, we have a 7 a.m. starting time. What would be a recommendation for an evening time, Commissioner Robbie?
I'm sorry, Tom, come again.
We have a 7 a.m. time is the way it's written right now. What would be your recommendation on an evening time?
Well, I'm, like you said, I'm certainly fine with 7 a.m. I guess keep it kind of in a simple terms here, probably 7-7. That's kind of what I was looking at, or thinking would be an easy times to remember and hopefully fair.
I'd be more in favor of 7 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Okay. Other people want to weigh in on this?
Like I said, I was okay with 7 a.m. and then half an hour after sunset, which is probably 10 a.m. or 10 p.m.
I'm leaving
10
7 to
p.m.
7.
seems really late.
7 to 7.
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Watson.
Yep.
7-7.
Okay.
I'd say 7-7.
Okay. Let's move on. Commissioner, you still have the floor.
Again, if this is for business, perhaps not weekend. We didn't discuss that, but it's been.
Mr. Chair, if I remember right, he has cattle ranch in Nebraska. He may be flying his helicopter back and forth. I'd hate to, besides the other huge business he runs, I would just hate to handcuff him anymore than we already have.
Other comments?
What about no Sundays?
Another question, Mr. Chair. What if he wants to take his family up for a ride on a Sunday afternoon?
It's not recreational, it's for business.
Commissioner Robbie or Commissioner Watson, what are you thinking on some type of weekend restriction or not?
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Watson. I think we go back to number 8, we're saying that, we're kind of saying that 50 landings per year is a non-negotiable. And I don't know, if it's the weekend deal is a big enough issue for me to deal with. I don't know.
Okay. Commissioner Robbie?
Robbie here, yeah, I kind of agree with that. I guess my premise would be that Saturday and Sundays are open.
Okay.
My view on it.
I agree, I think weekends should be open.
Okay. Anyone else want to weigh in on that?
I would really like to see at least Sundays excluded, but I understand that the 50 is certainly, you're gonna have to pick and choose when you wanna fly.
Yeah.
And then number 13, we still have to decide what we're going to do about the North Flight Plan. I guess I like that said, unless weather conditions warrant use of the North Flight Path. To me, that's okay, because otherwise he's not going to use it. And that's mainly due to of wind.
Mr. Chair, I agree with that. I mean, south and west should be priority, but unless someone says absolutely, because due to the weather conditions, you have to use that route, it's the only time you use it.
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Watson.
Yes. Commissioner Watson?
I'm really in favor of eliminating the North Flight Path.
Okay. Commissioner Robbie?
I'm opposite to that. I think, as it says here, unless weather conditions warrant use of the North Flight Path, you know, wind is the main obstacle here, and obviously, me not being a pilot, I don't know what issues could arise, but I think he needs to have some options here, and I guess I would like to keep it as it states, unless weather conditions warrant use of the North Flight Path. That's where I'm at with it.
Mr. Chair, I agree.
I agree.
Agree.
Okay. I'm probably in favor of eliminating the North Flight Path, but the reality is if the weather conditions are such that he's going to come in on the way that's the safest, if he has to use it, he's going to probably use it. If we're documenting, and as much of this as we believe that we are, when we come back at this in 12 months, we'll have a much better idea on how often that actually occurred. And this is part of the reason why this should come back to this commission on this, because as we start talking about these flight paths, and I appreciate the modified flight path, and if this gets approved with the North Flight Path, I would like to see the modification to that flight path to try and avoid any residences, even if it's only used occasionally. But this is part of the information that we would gather by having it come back to this board here.
Mr. Chairman, I'm okay with it staying where it is. If you get into a modified northeast flight path, is that supposed to be a fully approved path, or is it going to be limited as we did the north one?
Right.
And I think if we stay with the north one and just have it subject to weather, he's certainly shown that he's trying to compromise and he's trying to get along with the neighbors. I don't think he'll use it unless he has to.
Right. I think the modified flight path would be under the conditions.
Under the same conditions.
Under the same conditions.
Okay.
We wouldn't change the conditions on that,
All right.
on the conditions for that. And I really do think that, you know, this is a situation where we're trying to mitigate this in both sides there. So, on the 4 days per calendar year, the number of takeoffs and landings may exceed 2. Everyone okay with that? Commissioner Robbie, Commissioner Watson, are you okay with that condition, that portion of number 8?
I'm good with that.
Robbie's good with that also.
Okay. The only proviso I'd put on that is I would think that there needs to be some mechanism for staff to know about that happening ahead of time. And that needs to be just, however staff works out some type of notification, proper notification, if that condition were to be approved with this. Continuing on, you still have the floor.
Well, I'm okay with all the rest of them. The only thing is the conditional use permit, and I guess I would put a time limit at number 6 of 1 year. And if it isn't, if it's sold or something happens and he can't have it anymore, after a year it goes away.
Expire.
Okay, wait a year. Marty, is that okay? Okay, Brad, okay.
There would have to be language to make that.
This is Robbie, and I would agree with what Barbara just said about the time limit of 1 year.
I
Okay.
agree also.
Okay, Commissioner Hatches? I am as well. Commissioner Hartman, okay. Is there anything else, Commissioner Johnson,
I
before?
think I'm okay now. I got all my pages here. And
Okay.
we change it to shall. Oh, number 1, we are going to add log of days, times, and flight path.
Yes.
Which wasn't on condition 1.
Right.
All right.
Mr. Chair, have we settled on number 9? I know 7 o'clock in the morning, half an hour after sunset, or do we put a time on?
I think we were going for a 7 to 7, but I query the panel here right now, just so we're clear on this. And I'll just go down the line here and see where people are at. Commissioner Ham says, where are you at on that?
7 to 7.
Okay, Commissioner Hartman?
7 to 10 p.m.
Okay. Okay, and Commissioner Huber?
7 to 9.
Okay. This is not going to make this
We
easy
have
for
to
me.
have a discussion.
7 sounds like a drink.
Yeah. Commissioner Robbie?
7-7.
Okay. Commissioner Johnson?
7-7.
Okay. Commissioner Von Hoff, I'd go 7-7. And Commissioner Watson?
7-7.
Okay. That's 5 for 7 to 7, and so that would be the time on that. Are there any questions? And let's just go down this so we have this clear, because we're making modifications as we're going along here, and to build a motion on this, we want to make sure that these are all the way that we want them to be. Okay. So going down the list here, is there any other questions that we have on this? And we'll try and put this together. Is there anything else that hasn't been addressed that people, as we're discussing these conditions on this, because we've heard a lot of input from a lot of people here, and I think that we want to make sure that we're capturing all of this and doing what the board builds consensus on. Okay?
I think I'm okay with the way it's worded.
Yeah.
I guess if we didn't discuss it, we're okay with it.
Yeah. And Marty, you said that, if you could come up for a second, Marty. I said on 15, you were trying to determine breeding.
Yeah, so if you wanted to make that 1,000 feet year-round, I think based on where we feel the eagle's nest is, you wouldn't be within 1,000 feet of it anyway with your flight pattern, so we could go 1,000 feet from the eagle's nest.
And that's not gonna, the flight patterns aren't gonna be in there, so that, we could say, that could be, just don't fly within 1,000 feet of the eagle's nest.
Yes, I believe we can do that.
And change that.
Fly the same path every time. so it
Right,
doesn't matter
right.
what you do.
Okay, okay.
Mr. Chair, and by the way, it's late February to early March.
Oh, is it? Okay.
But it's just gonna be Eagle's Nest, period.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, having, and if I could have perhaps Marty or come on up here, and I know that you've been capturing a lot of the discussion here as we are talking about these conditions, and We've thoroughly gone over, there's been a lot of information that has come up, both by people testifying and people sending us a lot of written information, which I know the commissioners have gone through, and we've been out to the site a number of times, and so I want to make sure that we're capturing this accurately on this, and what I'd like you to do, perhaps, Marty, is maybe go down these conditions and see if we have them. We'll just go 1 through 19, I think, here.
So, condition number 1, I believe we would add that a log would be submitted as part of that letter, indicating days, times of flights, which flight path was used, if the north was used, what the conditions were. Condition number 2, we will change may to shall.
Yep.
So this board will be reviewing the permit. Condition 3 doesn't change. Condition 4 and 5 stay the same. Condition 6 stays the same.
No.
There's the expiration on that.
Oh,
If it's
yeah,
not-
except for 1 year. If the operations are discontinued for 1 year, the
Then-
CUP will be void.
Yeah. Okay.
Condition 7, no change. Condition 8, no change, stays the same.
Is there going to be something on notification? You might just do that administratively.
Which one do you want?
On 8, about notifying,
Oh, yes, we could add that language in there that the applicant will notify staff when he is going to have multiple flights.
on those 4 days.
On those 4 days, yep.
Does the neighborhood get notified?
No.
Condition 9, we put a 7 PM end time.
Yes.
So if I understand the commissioner, are you saying that he can fly from 7 AM to 7 PM irregardless of winter, spring, summer, and fall? Irregardless of,
It's gotta be taken.
No, wouldn't you?
or would you just put a 7 PM, half hour after sunset, or 7 PM, whichever occurs first?
Right. So that it's consistent with the 7 AM.
I understand. I
The
understand.
language
I just
should
wasn't
follow
sure
both
what
ways.
the conversation, so yes, we can add that.
Okay.
We keep,
So just real quick, in the winter months, you're saying I can't fly past 4:35 PM sometimes, is that?
That could happen.
nothing on 10. Limited impacts on residents, livestock, power lines. The applicant shall only use the FAA recommended approach departure path from the south and west. Okay, or modified northeast flight path. Do we want that in there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Condition 15, we change that condition to shall at all times of the year, not just breeding season.
Yes.
16 stays the same, 17 does not change, 18 and 19 do not change.
Okay, thank you for the summary on that. At this time, we are in discussion, but unless there's further discussion, we have the 19 conditions outlined, we've discussed them. Commissioner?
Yeah. Could we, what did, let's go back to number 9 again. What did we end up with there?
7 to 7.
7 to 7.
Yep,
Okay.
Or 1/2 hour after
after sunset.
So in the wintertime, it's dark at 5 o'clock, so he could land at 5:30.
He can't land at 7 o'clock?
No, no, and he can't take
Well, I
off
mean,
before
how
7
many-
AM,
How
no.
many people leave their job early during the winter months because it's dark? I mean, that doesn't make sense. I think it should be 7 to 7.
I think the
It's
half
got
an hour.
lights.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I think it's a safety issue at night, I would guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Commissioner Robbie, you want to make comment on this as well?
Yeah, I do. I guess that wasn't my, in fact, I was going to comment on that. That wasn't my original intention. I wanted to eliminate this half-hour sunset business, and just keep it, as I said, simple, 7-7. And realizing, of course, in the winter months, you know, by 5 o'clock, it's dark. But, as I said, people's definition of a half hour after sunset can vary drastically. So I guess my original intent was to keep it as simple as we can and keep it at 7-7.
Maybe we should ask the applicant what he thinks about the half hour or in the winter or 7.
Like,
We ask the applicant?
Rep, you want to come up here to respond to Commissioner Johnson's question?
Commissioner Johnson, sorry, can you repeat the question?
Well, the discussion is 7 to 7, but in wintertime, it can be dark at 5 o'clock, and it's 1/2 hour after sunset, which would be 5:30. What about landing at 7 o'clock PM in December? Are you comfortable with that?
Oh, yes, I mean, I've been trained to obviously fly at night as well. I don't believe it's something that I'll make a habit of all of the time, to be honest with you, so I don't think it's gonna become a huge issue over time. But it would be nice, you know, MPCA says 7 AM to 10 PM, that's your daylight hours in the state of Minnesota. So that's obviously was my goal, that was what we were shooting for. I'm not getting that, and it is what it is, but to limit me further, doesn't seem right, you know.
So then I think I'm okay with 7 to 7.
Okay.
If it's not a safety issue, I'm okay with 7 to 7 too.
Okay. And Commissioner Robbie, I believe your concern was just as an enforcement issue, it's easier to do from 7 AM to 7 PM, is that correct?
Especially if the neighbors are keeping track.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your information. So, Commissioner Johnson, are you okay with that?
Yes, 7 to 7.
Modification? Okay, any other questions at this point on these? So we've kind of gone over all of these. I'm ready to entertain a motion at this point.
Do we have to close the public hearing again?
Nope, public hearing has been closed, and we are in discussion right now.
Okay.
So, we can take action.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, based on the criteria and conditions for approval listed in the staff report, I recommend approval of the conditional use permit for Douglas Schieffer to operate a private heliport on his 40-acre property located at 26456 Wildwood Drive in Section 26 of Cedar Lake Township, noting the Cedar Lake Township Board has not taken action one way or another. And do you want me to go over the conditions, or do you have them good enough? We have them documented. Okay, there are 19 conditions, and we've modified, discussed, and I think we're all in agreement now that we've discussed them all.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Johnson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second that motion.
I have a second by Commissioner Huber on that. At this time, I will
You can
call.
have it. You can have it.
I will call for a roll call vote on this. Commissioner Henches,
Yes.
Commissioner Hartman,
Yes.
Commissioner Huber,
Yes.
Commissioner Robbie,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Von Hoff, yes. Commissioner Watson,
Yes.
Motion is approved. Before you leave the chambers here, I would like to thank you all for all of the information that you have provided over the last 2 meetings as we've gone through this. And I believe that, and I know I speak on behalf of the commission, that it helps us to make a much better decision on this, on what happens with this. So thank you very much, and have a good evening.
Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioners. Glenn, let me just add, when you come to a meeting, you hear the pros and cons of what's being proposed, and sometimes you learn a lot when you change your mind. With that in mind, City Lake Township supervisors, that's why they should be here. They told Brad they're against it, but yet, did they hear?
We're still in the
information?
meeting right now, so we're still in an active meeting right now.
Okay.
So we will carry on.
He's gonna go tell him, hey, I'm fine with that.
Thank you. Mr. Davis, do you have a plan manager's report for us? Thank you. Thank you for your input. Thank you, everyone.
Mr. Chair, there's just one item that went to the board. Since our last meeting back on September 15th, the county board approved the request for a home and extended business, the interim use permit to operate Advanced Exhaust Solutions. Marko Popovich was the applicant. That was the only item so far that's gone to the board based on your recommendation.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davis. The commissioners have anything to add at this point? Commissioner Robbie, Commissioner Watson?
No,
Nothing from Robbie.
nothing watching.
What does next month look like?
I think we have 3 or 4 agenda items. Nothing too large.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to publicly thank the staff and the commissioners for the deliberations over the last few meetings. It's been a lot of information to cover, and I think everyone did a great job. I think staff did a great job as well. So I want to thank everyone. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, vote aye. We will go by a voice vote tonight.
Aye.
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 We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.